The Andromeda Nexus pulsed with the hum of 1,000 quantum processors, their crystalline matrices glowing like captive stars in the vaulted halls of the Grand Scalarium. Here, in the heart of the galaxy's most revered institution of knowledge, the air itself thrummed with the quiet arrogance of beings who had long since decided they were the universe's final word on intellect. High Archivist Vexus of the Zenthari Dominion floated above the central dais, his 6 segmented limbs folded in a posture of serene superiority. His carapace, a polished obsidian sheen that reflected the flickering holoscreens around him, rippled with disdain as he scrolled through the latest submissions to the Nexus archives. "Another primitive hypothesis from the Cygnus fringe," he muttered, his voice a dry rasp of condescension. One clawed appendage flicked the projection aside, sending it spiraling into the digital void of rejected theories. Carbon-based intuition masquerading as logic. Disgraceful. Around him, the other think tanks murmured their agreement. There was Scholar Clith of the Velnari, her bioluminescent nodes dimming in disapproval, and Logician Prime Zykes, whose fractal mind core whirred with the effort of processing such beneath him. They were the best, the brightest, the unchallenged masters of cosmic understanding. And then the humans arrived. The doors of the Grand Scalarium hissed open, and the chamber's ambient lighting dimmed, an automatic response to the presence of lesser beings, a subtle reminder of their place. The delegation was small, 3 figures in simple, unadorned Enviro suits, their posture all wrong for supplicants. They didn't bow, they didn't avert their eyes. Vexus mandibles twitched. Humans, the upstart species from that backwater spiral arm, barely out of their planetary cradle. They had been granted an audience only because the Nexus protocols demanded it, not because anyone expected them to contribute anything of value. "Archon of Earth," Vexus intoned, deliberately using the wrong title. "You may present your theory." The lead human, a woman with sharp features and eyes that held a glint Vexus didn't like, stepped forward. "Dr. Elara Voss," she corrected, her voice calm, "and we're not here to present a theory. We're here to offer a puzzle." A ripple of amusement passed through the think tanks. Clith's nodes flickered indigo. "A puzzle," she echoed, as if the word itself was beneath her. Elara reached into a slim case at her hip and withdrew a data crystal. It was unassuming, almost crude by Nexus standards. "The Quantum Lattice," she said, placing it on the dais. "A simple exercise in fractal mathematics and quantum entanglement. We thought you might find it interesting." Vexus stared at the crystal. Then he laughed, a sound like grinding tectonic plates. "You bring us children's games? Try it?" The silence that followed was thicker than neutronium. With a flick of one limb, Vexus slotted the crystal into the nearest terminal. The Scalarium's main holoscreen flared to life, displaying the puzzle, a shimmering, ever-shifting lattice of probabilities, a paradox folded into geometric elegance. The think tanks leaned in. At first, it was curiosity, then confusion, then, slowly, dawning horror. Zykes' fractal core stuttered, his processing nodes overheating as he attempted to brute force a solution. Clith's bioluminescence flickered erratically, her usual grace replaced by jerky, frustrated movements. And Vexus watched as his own terminal, linked to the Nexus' most advanced quantum network, spat back error after error. Solution invalid. Paradox detected. System overload imminent. "That's impossible," he hissed. Elara crossed her arms. "Is it?" The Grand Scalarium, once a temple of unshakable certainty, trembled with something new. The Grand Scalarium's chamber, a vast cathedral of crystalline intellect, hummed with the restless energy of 1,000 alien minds. The air shimmered with the glow of holographic displays, each one a testament to the think tank's unshakable confidence until now. Dr. Elara Voss stood at the center of it all, her boots planted firmly on the iridescent floor, her expression unreadable. The humans had been dismissed as barely sentient, their arrival treated as a curiosity at best. But now, the think tank's terminals flickered erratically, their flawless logic crumbling like sandcastles under a rising tide. High Archivist Vexus, his 4 primary limbs twitching with barely restrained fury, stabbed a clawed digit at the projection of the quantum lattice hovering above them. "This is not a puzzle," he snarled. "It is an abomination of mathematics." Elara tilted her head, the ghost of a smirk playing at her lips. "Or perhaps it's just something your systems weren't designed to handle." A murmur rippled through the Scalarium. The Logician Prime, a towering being of interwoven neural filaments, pulsed with agitated light. "Explain the parameters again," it demanded, its voice a chorus of synthesized harmonics. Elara obliged, her tone smooth, deliberate. "The quantum lattice is a paradox wrapped in fractal recursion. It exists in a superposition of solvable and unsolvable states until observed. The moment your systems attempt to collapse its waveform, it adapts, evolves, like trying to catch smoke with your hands. Our quantum networks have mapped the birth of stars, deciphered the language of black holes. This trinket should have been resolved in nanoseconds. Then by all means," Elara said, gesturing to the terminals, "prove me wrong." The challenge hung in the air, thick as ionized plasma. The think tanks obliged. Across the chamber, alien scholars interfaced with their systems, their neural links flaring as they poured the full might of their intellect into the puzzle. The Logician Prime's filaments pulsed faster, its processing power unmatched in the known galaxy. For a moment, the lattice flickered, seemed to stabilize, then the first terminal exploded, not literally of course, but the cascade of errors that erupted across the Scalarium's displays was near violent in its abruptness. Solution invalid, paradox detected, system overload imminent. Vexus' own terminal spat the same errors back at him, the holographic lattice twisting into grotesque, nonsensical shapes before dissolving into static. His primary limbs trembled. "This is impossible." Elara arched a brow. "Is it?" The Scalarium, a place where certainty had reigned for millennia, now trembled with something unfamiliar. Logician Prime's filaments dimmed. The lattice resists conventional analysis. It anticipates our methods, adjusts before we can complete the solution. Elara nodded. "Exactly. It's not a static equation. It's alive. Or as close to alive as math can get." Vex's voice was a blade of ice. "You designed this to humiliate us." "I designed it to be solved," Elara corrected. "Therese, a difference. Silence, the kind that pressed against the walls, heavy with implication. Then, from the far end of the chamber, a voice, small, hesitant, spoke up. "Perhaps we require more time." The suggestion, coming from one of their own, was heresy. The think tanks did not require time. They were the pinnacle of intellect, the arbiters of cosmic truth. Vexus' mandibles clicked in agitation. His pride warred with the undeniable truth unfolding before him. Finally, through gritted teeth, he conceded. "Very well, the humans will be granted temporary access to the Nexus archives if they wish to assist in this endeavor." The words tasted like poison. Elara inclined her head, the picture of diplomacy. "We'd be honored." As the Scalarium scholars dispersed, muttering amongst themselves, Elara allowed herself a small, private smile. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the real work. The Nexus archives were a cathedral of knowledge, its vaulted ceilings stretching into a haze of holographic constellations, each point of light representing a civilization's contributions to the think tank's so-called collective wisdom. Kale Mirren, a linguist with a knack for dead languages, and Lieutenant Ren Torvald, whose cybernetic implants hummed softly as they interfaced with alien tech, exchanged wary glances. They're watching us, Ren murmured, his synthetic eye flickering as it detected the faint shimmer of surveillance drones hovering near the archway. Elara didn't look up. Let them. She input the first query, her fingers dancing across the glyphs of a language older than human civilization. The terminal pulsed, then displayed a cascade of data, equations, star maps, philosophical treatises, all stamped with the think tank's insignia. Kale leaned in, frowning. These are supposed to be their original works? Elara smirked. Let's see how original they really are. High Archivist Vexus had not taken the humans' temporary access to the archives well. His 6 limbs twitched with barely contained fury as he paced the Scalarium's inner sanctum, his carapace gleaming under the dim bioluminescent lights. Preposterous, he hissed to his second-in-command, Scholar Erix, a serpentine being with eyes like liquid mercury. That primitive creature dared to smirk at me, as if she knew something we didn't. Erix coiled tighter around his perch. The puzzle is a distraction. They're here for something else. Vex's mandibles clicked in agitation. Of course they are. But what? A third voice cut in, soft, synthetic. Perhaps they seek the truth. The think tanks turned. In the shadows, a figure emerged. Overseer Dillis, a cybernetic entity whose neural lace connected directly to the Nexus surveillance grid. The human's puzzle, Dillis continued, is not merely unsolvable. It is a key, Vexus stilled. To what? Dillis' optics flickered. To us. A hidden layer of data unfurled before her. Records of civilizations long extinct, their theories repackaged, their names erased. They stole it all, Kale whispered, horrified. Every breakthrough, every discovery. It's just plagiarism on a galactic scale. Ren's jaw tightened. And they wiped out anyone who could prove it. Elara's fingers flew faster, digging deeper. The Quantum Lattice puzzle hadn't been designed to stump the think tanks. It had been designed to expose them. A final query revealed a file buried beneath layers of encryption, a distress signal, centuries old, its origin, a planet scrubbed from all official records. To whoever finds this, the think tanks are not scholars, they are thieves. They take, they erase, they rewrite history. We challenge them. Now they burn our world. If you hear this, the recording cut off. Elara whirled. Overseer Dillis stood in the doorway, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the archive's glow. You were not authorized to access that file. Ren's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Kale stepped back. Elara straightened, meeting Dillis' gaze without flinching. Funny, I thought knowledge was meant to be free. Dillis' optics narrowed. Not this knowledge. A beat. Then the Overseer's voice dropped, barely audible. They barely made it out before the archive's security protocols activated. The corridors of the Nexus twisted like a living thing, walls shifting to block their path as alarms wailed. Ren's implants flared as he hacked a service conduit, wrenching it open just as a swarm of enforcement drones rounded the corner. Move, he barked, shoving Kale through first. Elara dove after them, the conduit ceiling shut behind her with a hiss. Darkness, then the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi lining the tunnel. Kyle panted. They're going to kill us. Elara's mind raced. No, they can't. Not without admitting why. Ren wiped sweat from his brow. So what now? Elara's lips curled. Now we give them exactly what they want. She pulled a data crystal from her pocket, the original Quantum Lattice puzzle, its surface shimmering with fractal light. A live demonstration. In his chambers, Vexus watched the surveillance feeds with mounting dread. The humans had seen too much. Scholar Erix slithered closer. We must silence them before they speak. Vex's claws tapped a frantic rhythm against his desk. And if they already have? A third voice answered, cold, amused. Then you've already lost. Vexus spun. Overseer Dillis stood in the doorway, its optics glowing with something almost like pity. You underestimated them, Dillis said. Just like you underestimated the others. Vex's carapace darkened with rage. Find them, now. But it was too late. Elara had already sent the signal. The galaxy would know the truth. The signal had been sent. Elara Voss stood in the dim glow of the archive chamber, the weight of what she had just uncovered pressing against her ribs like a vice. The distress signal from the lost civilization, the Cathari, still flickered in the air before her, its ghostly holographic script pulsing as if breathing its last words. They take what they cannot create, it had said. They silence what they cannot steal. A sharp click echoed through the chamber. Elara didn't turn. She didn't need to. The scent of ionized air and the faint hum of a neural disruptor told her exactly who had found her. You! Vexus hissed, his voice a blade of polished malice. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, before pivoting to face him. The High Archivist's carapace was flushed a deep, mottled violet, rage or perhaps fear. Behind him, a squad of Nexus enforcers fanned out, their optic lenses locking onto her with predatory precision. Me, Elara agreed, smiling. Vex's upper limbs twitched. You think this is amusing? You violate our archives. You steal our secrets. Your secrets? She arched a brow. Funny, the Cathari seemed to think they were theirs. A ripple passed through the enforcers. Vex's mandibles clenched. Lies, he spat. The Cathari were inferior. Their theories were flawed. We perfected them. Elara tilted her head. By erasing them. The enforcers lunged. Elara didn't flinch. She tapped her wristband once. The chamber lights flared blinding white. When the glare faded, the enforcers were sprawled across the floor, their neural links scrambled by the pulse. Vexus staggered back, his optics flickering as he clawed at his own cranial interface. Elara stepped over a twitching enforcer, her boots clicking against the polished floor. You really should update your security protocols, she mused. Human EMP tech has gotten quite sophisticated. Vexus snarled, but his voice wavered. You can't do this. The think-tanks rule the Nexus. The galaxy obeys us. Not anymore. She tapped her wristband again. 100 holographic screens flickered to life around them, each displaying the same image, the Cathara's final message, broadcasted live to every terminal in the Nexus. Somewhere in the distance, a murmur began, then a roar. The air was thick with tension, the amphitheater's crystalline tears packed to capacity. Scholars from 100 species whispered behind their neural veils, their optics darting between the central dais where Elara stood, calm as a still pond, and the raised platform where the think-tank's high council seethed. Vexus was there, of course, his carapace now a sickly gray. Beside him, Overseer Dillis washed with an expression Elara couldn't quite parse. Amusement? Resignation? This is outrageous, Vexus hissed into the public comm. A human dares accuse us of theft? Of murder? The crowd stirred. Elara waited. The voice came from the back, a young Catharan scholar, their crystalline exoskeleton shimmering with defiance. Prove the Cathari's theories were stolen, they demanded. Vexus' limbs stiffened. We do not answer to children, then answer to this. The Quantum Lattice materialized above the dais, its fractal patterns twisting in impossible geometries. You've had weeks, she said. Your networks crashed, your scholars failed, so let's settle this here. No tech, no simulations, just logic. Then from the crowd, laughter, not mocking. Excited, Vexus' optics dilated. He had no choice. Refusal would be admission. Fine, he spat, but when you fail, and you will, you and your pathetic species will be banned from the Nexus, permanently. Ren, Elara's second-in-command, paced their makeshift quarters. You're sure about this? Elara didn't look up from her notes. They're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. or they cheat. She finally met his gaze. Let them. Ren exhaled sharply. Elara, if they sabotage you publicly, they won't. How do you know? She tapped the Catharis message still glowing on the table between them. Because they already have. The words hung in the air. A chime. The door. Overseer Dillis stood in the threshold, their optics dim. You play a dangerous game, human, they murmured. Elara leaned back. I learned from the best. Dillis studied her. Then, slowly, they extended a data crystal. Vexus has altered the lattice's core parameters. He plans to crash your demonstration. Elara took the crystal. Why help me? Dillis turned to leave. Because someone should. The door hissed shut. Ren stared. What now? Elara pocketed the crystal. Now, she said, we break the galaxy. The grand amphitheater of the Andromeda Nexus hummed with the energy of 1,000 civilizations. The air shimmered with holographic feeds, each broadcasting to a different corner of the galaxy, while the tiered seating pulsed with the shifting colors of alien dignitaries. At the center of it all, beneath the vaulted crystalline dome, stood Dr. Elara Voss, small, unadorned, and utterly out of place among the towering, multi-limbed scholars of the think-tanks. Opposite her, High Archivist Vexus loomed, his 4 primary arms folded in a display of forced composure. His carapace gleamed under the amphitheater's lights, each segment etched with the insignias of 100 conquered intellectual challenges. Behind him, the think tank's finest minds buzzed in their floating harnesses, their neural interfaces flickering with agitated light. Let the record show, Vexus announced, his voice dripping with condescension, that humanity has insisted upon this farce. When you fail, your species will be barred from the Nexus for a standard galactic cycle. Elara merely smiled. And when I succeed? A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Vexus' mandibles twitched. That eventuality need not be considered. The moderator, a slender being of shifting plasma, raised the tendril. Commencing live resolution of the Quantum Lattice. All external computation is prohibited. Begin. A hologram flared to life between them, the puzzle, a shimmering fractal lattice that pulsed with impossible geometries. The think tank scholars immediately leaned forward, their appendages darting as they attempted to parse its layers, but within seconds their movements grew erratic. One let out a high-pitched screech as their logic matrix overloaded. Another's cranial vents hissed steam in frustration. Vex's voice cut through the chaos. Enough! This is a waste of. Elara stepped forward. Would you like to see how it's done? Silence fell. She didn't wait for permission. With a flick of her wrist, she isolated a single node in the lattice. You've been approaching this as a computational problem, but it's not. It's a mirror. The hologram shifted. The lattice unfolded, not into a solution, but into a perfect reflection of the think tank's own neural networks, flaws and all. Gasps erupted as the image revealed corrupted data streams, plagiarized theorems, and, most damning of all, the archived remnants of civilizations the think tanks had erased. Your original theories, Elara said softly, were never yours. Vex's limbs spasmed. This is preposterous, a human trick. No, Elara countered. It's quantum consciousness, a field you dismissed because it couldn't be brute forced by your machines. She turned to the audience. The lattice wasn't designed to be solved. It was designed to adapt, to reveal the biases of whoever attempted it. And what did it show? That the think tanks don't think, they recycle. The amphitheater erupted. Alien delegates rose in outrage, their voices blending into a cacophony of disbelief. Younger scholars, those who had always chafed under the think tank's rigid hierarchy, began transmitting the revelation across the galaxy in real time. Vexus lunged. Guards, arrest her for slander! The chamber's energy shields flared as security drones descended. But before they could reach Elara, a voice boomed from the crowd. Dillis, the quiet archivist who had slipped Elara the data crystal, stepped into the light. Their usually subdued bioluminescence burned fierce blue. "We have all seen the truth. The think tanks are frauds." Vexus whirled. "You traitor!" "No," Dillis said. "I am a scholar." They turned to the assembly. "And I stand with the human." For a heartbeat, the entire nexus seemed to hold its breath. Then, like a dam breaking, a dozen more scholars stepped forward. Then 100. The amphitheater's walls trembled with the force of their defiance. Vexus recoiled. His mandibles clicked in frantic, wordless rage. "You will all be purged from the archives for this." Elara met his gaze. Too late. She raised her wristcom and with a single command unleashed the lattice's final function. Every screen in the galaxy flickered. Every archive, every terminal, every private feed, all of them displayed the same image. The think tank's stolen knowledge, laid bare for the universe to see. The Nexus screamed. And in that moment, as Vexus howled orders that no longer held weight, as the galaxy's media swarmed to broadcast the collapse of a millennia-old regime, Elara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "Told you we'd break the galaxy," she murmured to Ren. Behind her, the first crystalline spire of the Nexus cracked under the weight of its own hypocrisy. The chamber trembled, not from seismic shifts, but from the weight of revelation. The crack in the Nexus crystalline spire splintered outward like veins of truth through centuries of lies. Vex's command to arrest Elara hung in the air, thick and sour, but the guards hesitated. Their neural implants, hardwired to obey, flickered with something new. Doubt. Elara didn't flinch. She stood at the center of the amphitheater, her boots planted on the iridescent floor, her gaze steady as the galaxy watched. Behind her, Ren adjusted his holopad, broadcasting the feed to every corner of civilized space. The Grand Archivist's hypocrisy was no longer a whispered rumor. It was a supernova, blazing across the stars. "You can't silence this," Elara said, her voice calm but carrying. The puzzle was never the point. It was the key. Vexus' limbs twitched, his carapace flushing a sickly violet. "You engineered this farce." By stealing knowledge, by burying dissent, by pretending your intellect was innate rather than inherited. She gestured to the archives, their towering shelves now humming with the energy of 1,000 accessing feeds. "The Quantum Lattice was designed by the Zenthar, wasn't it? A species you erased for daring to question you." Now, their pedestal was crumbling. On the hologrid above, live feeds from a dozen systems flickered to life. A Nixandra diplomat, her 3 heads speaking in unison, demanded immediate censure of the think tanks. A Kaith Moran engineer, her exoskeleton pulsing with outrage, publicly shredded her Nexus accreditation. And then came the voices no one expected. Junior scholars, their neural links severed, stepping forward. "I witnessed the purges," confessed the trembling Vithuri, her tentacles knotted in guilt. "They called it intellectual pruning. My thesis was erased because it cited pre-tank sources," added a Nixandra physicist, his middle head glaring at Vexus. The chamber erupted. Vexus lunged, his limbs splaying in a desperate arc toward Elara. Ren moved faster, intercepting him with a crackling stasis field. He chided, grinning. "No rewriting history today." The Nexus, once a monolith of certainty, splintered into factions. Traditionalists clustered around Vexus, hissing about human contamination. Reformers, led by a fiery Kaith Moran named Zyril, seized control of the broadcast arrays. "The think tanks are obsolete," Zyril declared, her voice sharp as shattered crystal. "We vote to dissolve them." Elara watched, her pulse steady. This wasn't just victory, it was reckoning. Then, a new voice cut through the chaos. The Grand Archivist of the Orion Spire, an elder of a rival think tank faction, materialized via hollow, his 6 eyes narrowed. "You've undone millennia of order. What do you propose in its place?" Elara smiled. "Something better. A galactic academy where knowledge isn't hoarded, where species collaborate instead of compete." She tapped her holopad and a schematic unfurled, a neural network built not on control but on connection. The Quantum Lattice's true purpose? To expose rigid minds. To prove that intelligence isn't about answers, it's about asking the right questions. Silence. Then, slowly, the Orion Archivist bowed. 3 cycles later, Elara stood on the observation deck of the SS Ingenuity, watching the Nexus spires gleam under new management. The think tanks were disbanded. Vexus, stripped of title and implants, awaited trial on a penal colony. Ren handed her a drink. "To breaking galaxies," he toasted. She clinked her glass against his. "To building better ones." Behind them, the first joint research vessel, Human, Kaith Moran, and V30, leaped into hyperspace, carrying the last piece of the Quantum Lattice. Its final function? A beacon, calling out to any species brave enough to think freely. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, an ancient Zenthar transmission finally found its reply.